The storm came without warning, tearing across the fields of HFY 7 like an angry beast. Rain hammered against the roof of the small farmhouse and wind howled through the valley. Daehyun stood at his window, watching his crops bend and sway in the violent weather. He had lived through many storms on this frontier world, but something about this one felt different. The sky flashed with colors that did not belong to normal lightning. He pulled on his heavy coat and boots, preparing to check on the animals in the barn. The 6 cows and dozen chickens were probably terrified. As he stepped outside, the wind nearly knocked him over. He pushed forward, one hand shielding his face from the stinging rain. The barn was only 50 meters away, but it felt like a kilometer in this weather. Halfway across the muddy yard, he heard it. A sound that did not belong to the storm. A crash followed by a strange humming noise that made his teeth ache. He turned toward his eastern field and saw something glowing in the darkness. Whatever it was had carved a deep trench through his wheat. Daehyun's first thought was aircraft trouble. Sometimes traders or cargo ships had engine problems and made emergency landings. He grabbed the emergency lamp from the barn and trudged toward the light. The mud sucked at his boots with every step. What he found was not a ship. It was a woman lying face down in the mud, her body partially buried in the dirt. Strange robes clung to her form, shimmering even in the rain. They looked expensive, covered in patterns that seemed to move and shift. But they were torn and burned in places. Daehyun knelt beside her, checking for signs of life. Her skin was warm, almost hot to the touch. He rolled her over carefully, and his breath caught in his throat. She was the most unusual person he had ever seen. Silver hair plastered to her face, skin that seemed to glow faintly even in the darkness. As the rain washed mud from her cheeks, he saw markings there. They looked like scales shimmering with a soft light before fading away. Her eyes fluttered open for just a moment. They were amber, bright as fire, and filled with pain. She tried to speak, but only a weak sound came out. Then she went limp again. Daehyun did not hesitate. He was not a strong man, but years of farm work had made him capable. He lifted her as gently as he could and carried her toward the barn. The farmhouse was warmer, but he did not know who or what this woman was. Until he understood more, the barn seemed safer for both of them. Inside the barn, away from the storm, he laid her on a bed of clean hay. The animals watched nervously from their stalls. Daehyun brought every blanket he could spare from the house, along with his medical kit. It was basic, meant for treating injured animals mostly, but it would have to do. He cleaned the mud from her face and hands. The scale-like markings appeared and disappeared on her skin, as if her body could not decide what it wanted to be. Her robes were beyond his understanding, made from material that seemed alive. He covered her with blankets and checked her wounds. She had burns on her arms and a deep cut across her ribs. He treated what he could, his hands steady despite his confusion. As he worked, she began to speak in her sleep. The words were not in any language he knew, but some of them started to sound familiar after a while. She repeated certain phrases over and over. Betrayed throne, Somin. Her voice was rough, filled with anger and sorrow. Daehyun sat back on an old stool watching her. He should probably call the colonial authorities. This woman was clearly not human, at least not entirely. She might be dangerous. But something stopped him from reaching for his communicator. Maybe it was the look of pain on her face. Maybe it was the way she had reached out weakly when she first opened her eyes, as if begging for help. He had been alone for 3 years now, ever since the plague took his parents and younger sister. In that time, he had learned that kindness was rare on frontier worlds. People were too busy surviving to care about strangers. But his mother had taught him better than that. When someone needs help, she had said, you help them. It is that simple. So he stayed in the barn that night, keeping watch over the strange woman. He added wood to the small heater, keeping the space warm. He changed her bandages twice when blood seeped through. And he waited. The storm finally broke just before dawn. The first light came through the cracks in the barn walls, painting everything in shades of gold. The woman stirred, her eyes opening slowly. This time they stayed open. She looked around, confused, then focused on Daehyun. Where? Her voice was hoarse but strong. She spoke his language now, though with an accent he could not place. My barn, Daehyun said simply. You crashed in my field during the storm. You were hurt. She tried to sit up, gasped in pain, and fell back. Her hand went to her ribs where he had bandaged the worst wound. She looked down at herself. at the blankets and clean bandages, then back at him. You
Helped me?
You needed help, he said. She stared at him as if he had said something impossible. Her amber eyes studied his face, searching for something. You do not know who I am. No, Daehyun admitted. Should I? A bitter laugh escaped her lips. Once everyone knew who I was. Now it seems I am just a stranger in a barn. She closed her eyes. Perhaps that is better. What is your name? He asked. She hesitated for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Hyejin, I am Daehyun. This is my farm. He stood up and moved to the small storage area where he kept supplies. Are you hungry? I can bring food. Why are you helping me? Hyejin asked. There was genuine confusion in her voice. You do not know what I am. I could be dangerous, Daehyun paused, thinking about his answer. My mother used to say that we are all dangerous when we are desperate and alone. She also said that kindness costs nothing but means everything. He looked back at her. You are hurt and alone. That is all I need to know right now. Tears formed in Hyejin's amber eyes. She turned her face away, perhaps ashamed to show such emotion. Your mother was a wise woman. She was, Daehyun said softly. She died 3 years ago. Plague. I am sorry. Me too. He found a clean bowl and filled it with water from the pump. Rest now. We can talk more later. As he left the barn to prepare breakfast, Hyejin lay in the hay staring at the wooden ceiling. She tried to summon her power, to feel the dragon fire in her blood. Nothing came. The poison had done its work well. Salmon had made sure of that. Her cousin had taken everything from her throne, her power, her empire, and then cast her into exile with just enough life left to suffer. But this human, this Daehyun, had given her something unexpected. He had given her shelter without asking for anything in return. He had treated her wounds with gentle hands. He had shown her kindness in a universe that had forgotten what that word meant. For the first time in her 500 years of life, Empress Hyejin of the Draconis Empire did not know what to think about humanity. Morning light filled the barn with warmth. Daehyun returned carrying a tray with simple food, rice porridge, dried fish, and hot tea. He found Hyejin sitting up, though her face showed the effort it took. The scale-like markings on her skin were more visible now, fading in and out like breathing. You should rest more, he said, setting the tray beside her. I have rested enough. Her voice was stronger than the night before. I cannot stay here. When they find me, they will destroy everything you have. Daehyun sat down on the stool. Who will find you? Hyejin looked at him carefully, as if measuring how much to tell. My enemies, my family. Perhaps both, since they are now the same. She picked up the bowl of porridge, smelling it cautiously. What is your world called? HFY 7. It is a farming colony. We grow wheat and vegetables for the inner systems. He poured tea for both of them. Most people just call it home. A farming colony, she repeated, tasting the porridge. Her eyes widened slightly. This is good. Simple, but good. Simple is all I know how to make, Daehyun said with a small smile. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Outside, birds began their morning songs. The storm had passed completely, leaving everything clean and fresh. Daehyun could see through the barn door that his eastern field was ruined where Hyejin had crashed, but the rest looked fine. Tell me about your enemies, Daehyun said finally. Hyejin set down her bowl. I ruled an empire. Hundreds of star systems, thousands of worlds, billions of lives. I was empress for 3 centuries. She touched the fading scales on her arm. My people are called the Draconis. We can shift forms, becoming dragons. We conquered the stars because we were strong and strength was everything. Was? Daehyun noticed the past tense. My cousin Somin wanted the throne. She poisoned me with something that blocks my power. Then she convinced the council that I had become weak, unfit to rule. Hyejin's hands clenched into fists. They exiled me to die in the void. But my ship's emergency system brought me here before it failed completely. Daehyun absorbed this information quietly. An empress. An alien empress who could turn into a dragon. It should have been terrifying. Instead, he just felt sad for her. What kind of empress were you? Did your people love you or fear you? The question hit Hyejin like a physical blow. She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. Her confident expression crumbled. I do not know. I never asked. I never thought to ask. She looked down at her hands. They obeyed me. That was enough. Or so I believed. Obedience and love are different things, Daehyun said gently. Yes. I am beginning to understand that. She met his eyes. Why do you ask such questions? You are just a farmer. Just a farmer, Daehyun repeated with a slight smile. My father used to say that farmers understand the important things. We know that you cannot force crops to grow faster. We know that sometimes the smallest seed becomes the strongest tree. We know that nature does not care about power or titles. It only cares about adaptation and patience. Hyejin studied him with new interest. Your parents taught you much wisdom. They taught me enough to survive, he said. Now can you walk? I need to check on my crops, and sitting in the barn all day will not help you heal. Over the next few days, Hyejin learned what it meant to be human. She followed Daehyun around the farm, at first just watching, then slowly helping. Her wounds healed faster than human wounds would. But without her full power, she was still weak. She watched him repair a section of fence damaged by the storm. He did not have fancy tools or advanced technology, just wood, nails, and his own 2 hands. When a piece of wood did not fit correctly, he did not force it. He simply cut another piece. Adaptation, Hyejin said, remembering his earlier words. Exactly. Daehyun hammered in another nail. The Draconis conquered through strength, you said. But what did you build? The question troubled her. We built an empire, did you? Or did you just take what others built and claim it as yours? He was not being cruel, just honest. Humans are not the strongest species. We are not the fastest or the smartest, but we survive because we build things. We create solutions. We adapt to any environment. Hyejin picked up a hammer, feeling its weight. Teach me, so he did. He taught her how to mend fences, how to check crops for disease, how to repair the water system when it clogged. She was clumsy at first, her hands unused to such basic labor, but she learned quickly. There was intelligence in those amber eyes and a hunger to understand. One afternoon, while they were replanting the section of field she had destroyed, Hyejin suddenly laughed. It was the first time Daehyun had heard such a sound from her. What is funny? He asked. Me. The empress of the Draconis Empire planting wheat in the mud. She wiped dirt from her face, smearing it worse. My council would die of shock if they could see this. Is it so bad? Daehyun asked. Being here, doing this? She looked around at the fields, the clear sky, the simple farm. No, that is what is strange. It is not bad at all. For the first time in centuries, I feel useful. Like what I do actually matters. It does matter. These crops will feed people. That fence will keep animals safe. Small things, but real things. He packed soil around a young wheat plant. My father said that real power is not about ruling others. It is about making things better than you found them. Your father was also wise, he had to be. Frontier life does not forgive stupid decisions. That evening, as they ate dinner in the farmhouse, Hyejin told Daehyun more about the Draconis Empire. She spoke of planets turned to ash when they resisted, of species enslaved or destroyed, of a culture built entirely on dominance and fear. Her voice grew quiet as she talked, shame creeping in. We never created anything, she admitted. We took technology from conquered worlds. We forced others to build our ships, our cities, our weapons. The Draconis themselves only knew destruction. Knew, Daehyun said. Past tense again. Because I am beginning to see how wrong we were. How wrong I was. She looked at him. You humans, you seem weak compared to my people. But you have something we do not. You have this determination to build and create and improve. You never give up even when everything seems impossible. We call it stubbornness, Daehyun said with a grin. Perhaps stubbornness is a form of strength we never understood. On the 5th day, Hyejin felt it, a familiar presence far above in orbit. Her power was still suppressed, but her senses were returning. She stood in the field looking up at the sky, and knew that her time here was ending. They are coming, she told Daehyun that night. My people. I can feel them searching. The ones who want to help you or the ones who want to kill you. I do not know yet. Maybe both. She turned to him. You should leave. Go to the nearest city. When they arrive, this place will become a battlefield. Daehyun looked around his farm, the land his family had worked for decades. This is my home. I do not run from my home. You will die, Hyejin said flatly. Maybe, but I will die standing in my own field, not running away. He met her fierce gaze without flinching. Besides, someone needs to make sure you do not do something stupid when your people arrive. Something stupid? Like starting a war in my wheat field. That would be very rude. Despite everything, despite the approaching danger, Hyejin laughed. This human, this simple farmer was either the bravest person she had ever met or the most foolish. Perhaps both. As night fell, lights appeared in the sky. Ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel, their engines burning bright. The first wave of the Draconis fleet had arrived, and they were coming for their empress. The ships came at dawn, turning the morning sky into a display of fire and metal. Daehyun stood outside his farmhouse, a cup of tea growing cold in his hands, watching the massive vessels descend. They were nothing like human ships. These looked alive, covered in scales of armor that shimmered like Hyejin's skin. Some were shaped like dragons themselves, with wings spread wide and heads full of weapon arrays. Hyejin stood beside him, her face unreadable. The wind from the landing ships whipped her silver hair around her face. The red and gold ship is Admiral Ji-woo. She was my most loyal commander. If anyone would search for me, it would be her. And the black ones? Daehyun pointed to 3 darker ships positioning themselves on the opposite side of the valley. Somin's forces. Hyejin's voice went cold. She is not taking chances. She wants to finish what she started. The red and gold ship landed first, settling into Daehyun's northern field with surprising gentleness for something so large. A ramp extended and figures emerged. They moved with deadly grace, warriors in armor that seemed to be part of their bodies. At their head walked a woman with short dark hair and eyes that glowed with inner fire. Admiral Ji-woo saw Hyejin and froze. Her expression shifted through shock, joy, relief, and rage in the span of seconds. Then she was running, her warriors following. She dropped to one knee in the mud of Daehyun's farm, her fist over her heart. Empress, you live. Thank the old flames, you live. Ji-woo's voice shook with emotion. Rise, Ji-woo. There is no need for ceremony here. Hyejin helped her stand. Though I am surprised you found me. I have searched every world in this sector for 3 months. Your emergency beacon gave one final pulse before dying. It took time to trace it here. Ji-woo's eyes found Daehyun and her expression hardened. This human. What has he done to you? He saved my life, Hyejin said simply. He gave me shelter and asked nothing in return. Ji-woo looked confused by this concept. Nothing? What was his price? There was no price. He helped because I needed help. Hyejin placed a hand on Ji-woo's shoulder. I have learned much in my time here, old friend. About humans and about ourselves. The black ships began landing, surrounding the farm from 3 sides. Soldiers poured out, hundreds of them forming battle lines. At their center came Somin, walking with the confidence of someone who believed she had already won. She looked younger than Hyejin, with sharp features and cold eyes. Sister, Somin called out, though they were cousins, not sisters. You are harder to kill than I expected. I will correct that mistake now. Ji-woo and her warriors immediately formed a protective circle around Hyejin and Daehyun, weapons charged with energy that made the air crackle. You will have to go through us first, traitor, Ji-woo snarled. That can be arranged. Somin smiled, and her soldiers raised their weapons. Stop. Daehyun's voice was not loud, but something about it cut through the tension. Everyone turned to stare at the human who dared speak. He walked forward, stepping between the 2 armies with nothing but a teacup in his hand. Stop this right now. Who is this insect? Somin demanded. This insect is the man whose land you are standing on, Daehyun said calmly. And I'm telling you that if you want to have your war, you can have it somewhere else. I have crops growing here. Several of Somin's soldiers actually laughed. Ji-woo looked horrified. Hyejin covered her face with one hand, though whether in embarrassment or to hide a smile, it was hard to tell. You dare speak to me? Somin's eyes began to glow. Scales erupted across her skin. I am Empress of the Draconis Empire. No, you are not. Daehyun set his teacup down on a fence post. You are someone who poisoned her own family and stole a throne. That does not make you an empress. That makes you a criminal. The laughter stopped. Somin's face turned purple with rage. I will burn you to ash, human. Then you prove me right, Daehyun said. You prove that you are not fit to rule anything. A real leader does not murder those who speak truth. A real leader listens. Daehyun, Hyejin said quietly, moving to stand beside him. You do not need to do this. Yes, I do. This is my home, and I will not let it burn because 2 cousins cannot solve their problems like adults. He looked at the gathered soldiers. Hundreds of alien warriors with weapons that could level his entire farm in seconds. Look at all of you. You have the power to destroy planets. But what have you built? What have you created? When was the last time any of you made something that helped people instead of hurt them? We built an empire, Soman snapped. You conquered an empire. There is a difference. Daehyun pointed to his farm. I built this. Every fence, every field, every building. With my own hands. It is not much, but it is mine. It is real. Can any of you say the same? Some of the soldiers, especially the younger ones, looked uncomfortable. They shifted their weight, glanced at each other. These were questions they had never been asked before. The human speaks wisdom, Jiwoo said slowly. She looked at Soman. Challenge him if you want, cousin. But know that every soldier here will hear his words. They will wonder, and they will judge. Soman's rage was a physical thing now. Her form rippled, trying to shift into her dragon shape. But she controlled herself with visible effort. Fine, you want a trial? You want evidence? She pulled a data crystal from her armor. I have proof of Hyejin's crimes. Proof of her weakness. Proof that she was leading our empire to ruin. Show us, Daehyun said. Jiwoo had one of her soldiers project the data into the air. Images appeared, showing battles where Hyejin had chosen retreat over pointless sacrifice. Diplomatic meetings where she had negotiated instead of conquering. Resources spent on infrastructure instead of weapons, you see? Soman gestured at the images. She was making us weak. She was turning us into them. She pointed at Daehyun with disgust. Into builders instead of destroyers? Hyejin stepped forward, her voice carrying across the field. Into people who create instead of consume? Yes, Somin. That is exactly what I was trying to do. She looked at the assembled soldiers. I have spent 500 years watching our empire devour everything it touches. And I finally realized that when there is nothing left to conquer, we will turn on ourselves. We will burn our own house down rather than learn to build. Lies, Soman shouted. We are dragons. We are meant to rule through strength. Strength? Daehyun laughed, and there was an edge to it now. You think strength is destruction? You think power is fear? He walked toward Soman, unarmed and unafraid. Humans have been nearly destroyed a dozen times. Plagues, wars, disasters. We survived because we were stubborn enough to rebuild. Every single time, that is strength. That is power. One human lecturing the Draconis Empire. Soman's voice dripped with contempt. This is what you have learned, Hyejin? To take lessons from primitives? This primitive kept me alive when your poison should have killed me, Hyejin said. This primitive showed me more honor in 5 days than you have shown in your entire life. The two cousins faced each other now, power crackling between them. Soldiers on both sides tensed, ready for battle. The morning sun climbed higher, turning the farm into an arena made of wheat and mud. I offer you a choice, Soman, Hyejin said. Stand down. Face trial for your crimes. The soldiers will judge you and justice will be served. Never. I will never bow to you again. Soman's form began to shift, scales covering her body. I challenge you, Hyejin. Right here, right now. Dragon trial. The winner takes the throne. You are still poisoned, Jiwoo protested. You cannot shift. This is not a fair fight. Since when does Soman care about fairness? Daehyun asked. Hyejin raised a hand, silencing them both. She could feel the poison still in her veins, blocking her power. She could not shift, could not access her full strength. Soman knew this. This was meant to be an execution, not a trial. But she also felt something else. Something she had learned in Daehyun's barn, working in his fields, listening to his simple wisdom. Strength was not just about power. It was about knowing when to fight and when to think, when to use force and when to use words. I accept your challenge, Hyejin said. But not here. And not now, coward. Soman laughed. No, practical. Hyejin smiled, and it was not a kind expression. You want to fight? Then we fight according to human rules. We present our cases to the soldiers. We let them see the evidence. We let them decide who is fit to rule. That is not how dragon trials work. It is now. Because I learned something from this human that you never will. Hyejin's eyes blazed with amber fire. Real power is not taken. It is earned. The soldiers formed a circle around the two fleets, creating an arena in Daehyun's wheat fields. This had never happened before in Draconis history. A trial decided not by combat but by words, by evidence, by something humans called justice. Soman paced like a caged predator, furious at being denied her kill. But she could not refuse without looking like a coward in front of hundreds of soldiers, and so she agreed, her rage barely contained. Admiral Jiwoo set up a projection system, and both sides were given time to present their arguments. The soldiers sat or stood, watching with expressions ranging from curiosity to confusion. This was not their way, but something about it felt right to many of them, especially the younger warriors. Soman went first. She spoke of tradition, of strength, of the old ways that had made the Draconis Empire great. She showed recordings of Hyejin's diplomatic meetings, spinning them as weakness. She displayed resource allocations that favored building over military spending, calling it betrayal of their warrior culture. She was making us soft, Soman declared. She was turning us into farmers and traders instead of conquerors. She was destroying everything our ancestors built. Many of the older soldiers nodded. This was what they believed. This was what they had been taught since birth. Strength through conquest, power through fear. Then it was Hyejin's turn. She stood before the assembled warriors, still weak from poison, still unable to access her full power, but her voice carried across the field with absolute authority. My cousin is right about one thing. I was changing our empire. I was trying to make us into something new. She looked at each soldier in turn. But ask yourselves, what happens when there is nothing left to conquer? What happens when we have burned every world and enslaved every species? Do we stop, or do we turn on each other? Silence. The question hung in the air like smoke. I have ruled for 300 years. In that time, I have watched us consume resources faster than they can be replaced. I have seen conquered species learn to hate us so much that they choose death over submission. I have watched our own people become so addicted to war that they do not know how to live in peace. Hyejin's voice grew stronger, and I finally understood. We are not building an empire. We are building our own funeral pyre. Lies to excuse weakness. Soman shouted. Is it weakness to plan for the future? Hyejin asked. Is it weakness to build instead of destroy? Is it weakness to create something that will last beyond our lifetimes? Daehyun stepped forward then, standing beside Hyejin. Several soldiers raised their weapons, but Jiwoo waved them down. Let the human speak, she said. I am no one important, Daehyun began. Just a farmer on a frontier world. But I know something about survival. My people, humans, we have nearly died out more times than I can count. Wars, plagues, disasters that should have ended us. But we survived. You want to know how? He looked around at the alien faces watching him. We survived because we were too stubborn to die. Because when everything was destroyed, we rebuilt. Because we learned from our mistakes instead of repeating them. Because we understood that real strength is not about how hard you can hit. It is about how many times you can get knocked down and still stand up. Pretty words from a primitive. Someone sneered. Maybe. But this primitive is still alive while your ancestors are dust. Daehyun's voice hardened. You call yourselves dragons? You think you are the strongest species in the galaxy. But let me ask you something. When was the last time you created new technology instead of stealing it? When was the last time you built a city from nothing instead of conquering one? When was the last time you made something that did not involve death? No one answered. The silence stretched out, uncomfortable and heavy. Humans are weak, Daehyun continued. We break easy. We die from things that would not even hurt you, but we are still here on 1,000 worlds building and growing and creating. Why? Because we understand something you do not. He pointed to his farm, to the fields and fences and buildings. This is mine. I built it. When the next storm comes, and I will rebuild. When the crops fail, I will plant new ones. When the fence breaks, I will fix it. I will never stop trying. That is humanity. That is our strength. Jiwoo stepped forward now. I have served Empress Hyejin for 2 centuries. I have watched her lead us through wars and peace. And I will tell you what I have learned. She looked at Soman. You are strong, Soman. Everyone knows this. But strength alone does not make a good leader. You want to rule through fear. Hyejin wanted to rule through vision. And now, having seen what humans can do with their weakness, I am starting to understand her vision. Traitor, Somin hissed. No, loyal. Loyal to the Empire, not to your ambition. Jiwoo turned to the soldiers. I was there when Hyejin started the reforms. I argued against them. I thought she was being foolish, trying to make us into something we are not. But I have also seen the results. Worlds that chose to join us instead of fighting. trade that brought wealth without blood, technology developed by our own people instead of stolen. And I realized maybe the Empress was not making us weak. Maybe she was making us better. This is insanity. Salmon's form rippled with barely contained rage. You are all insane. We are dragons. We were meant to rule, not to serve, not to build, not to create. We take what we want because we have the power to do so. Then take it, Hyejin said quietly. Take my throne, Sumin. Kill me here in front of all these witnesses. Use your power to silence the truth. Show everyone what your rule will look like. Salmon smiled, a terrible expression full of triumph. Her form shifted fully now, becoming a dragon. Scales covered her body, wings erupted from her back, and fire built in her throat. She was magnificent and terrible, a creature of pure destructive power. Hyejin stood her ground, unable to shift, unable to defend herself. The poison still blocked her power. This was what Somin had wanted all along, a public execution that would cement her claim to the throne. But Daehyun stepped in front of Hyejin, spreading his arms wide. No, you want to kill her? You kill me first. Move aside, insect, or burn with her. Somin growled, her voice distorted by her dragon form. No. Daehyun did not move. You claim to be strong? Prove it. Kill an unarmed human. Show everyone here what your strength really means. Somin hesitated. In that moment of hesitation, something shifted. Soldiers began to murmur. They looked at this small human standing fearlessly before a dragon. They saw him protecting their empress with nothing but his own body. And they saw what Somin was willing to do to claim power. She was right about you, a voice called out. One of Somin's own soldiers, a young warrior with scars across his face. You care nothing for honor. You care nothing for the Empire. You only care about power. Silence, Somin roared. No. Another soldier stood, then another. We have fought and died for the Empire. We believed we were building something great, but all we did was destroy. All we did was take. Maybe it is time to try something different. More soldiers stood from both sides now. The murmuring grew louder, became a chorus of doubt and questioning. These warriors had been raised to believe in strength through conquest. But they had also seen the cost. They had seen worlds turned to ash, species driven to extinction, and an empire that consumed everything without creating anything. And now, they saw an alternative, a human weak and small, showing them what real courage looked like. Salmon's dragon form trembled with rage. She wanted to burn them all, to destroy this entire farm and everyone on it, but she could not. If she did, she would prove everything Hyejin and Daehyun had said. She would show that her rule would be based on fear and murder, not strength and honor. Slowly, reluctantly, she shifted back to her humanoid form. This is not over, she said, her voice shaking with barely suppressed fury. You are right, Hyejin said. It is not. You will face trial for your crimes, poisoning an empress, attempting a coup, trying to murder witnesses. The soldiers will judge you and they will decide your fate. I demand dragon trial, combat to decide the throne, and I refuse, because I learned from Daehyun that there are better ways to solve problems. Hyejin's power finally stirred, the poison beginning to break down in her system. Scales appeared on her arms, glowing with inner fire. You wanted to make me weak, Somin, but you gave me something better. You gave me time to learn what real strength means. The soldiers closed in around Somin, not with violence but with determination. They had made their choice. Admiral Jiwoo stepped forward and carefully removed the weapons from Somin's armor. You will have your trial. You will have your chance to speak. But the age of ruling through fear alone is over. Somin was led away to one of the ships, confined but unharmed. The crisis had passed, resolved not through fire and blood but through words and ideas. It felt wrong to many of the older warriors, but to the younger ones it felt like hope. His ships remained in orbit around HFY 7 for 3 more weeks. The soldiers set up temporary camps in the fields around Daehyun's farm, careful not to damage the crops more than necessary. It was the strangest military encampment in Draconis history. Instead of preparing for war, they were preparing for justice. Hyejin held court in Daehyun's barn. It seemed appropriate somehow that the place where she had been reborn would also be where her empire was reborn. Soldiers came and went, bringing reports and evidence. Somin's trial was conducted with careful attention to detail, with witnesses and records and debate. It was slow. It was frustrating for warriors used to quick decisions made by the strongest voice, but it was fair. And fairness, Hyejin was learning, mattered more than speed. Daehyun continued his farm work during all of this. He repaired fences while dragons argued law in his barn. He watered crops while empires shifted around him. When soldiers asked him questions about human culture and philosophy, he answered while checking his tomatoes for pests. "Does it not bother you?" Admiral Jiwoo asked him one afternoon. "All these soldiers, all these ships, your quiet life has been destroyed." Daehyun looked around at the organized chaos filling his farm. "It is different, yes, but life is always changing. You adapt or you fail." He pointed to a section of wheat that had been trampled during the landings. "That field is ruined for this season. But next season I will plant something different there. Maybe the soil will be better for it. You never know." Jiwoo studied him with the same fascination she might give to a complex battle strategy. "You humans are very strange." "We get that a lot." The trial concluded on the 20th day. The evidence was overwhelming. Somin had not only poisoned Hyejin, she had also embezzled Empire resources, assassinated rivals, and fabricated intelligence reports to start profitable wars. Her crimes went back decades. She had been preparing her coup for a very long time. The soldiers voted. It was not unanimous, but it was clear. Somin was guilty. The sentence was exile, but not the killing kind that Somin had tried to inflict on Hyejin. She would be sent to a labor colony on the Empire's frontier, where she would spend the rest of her life helping to build instead of destroy. It was a mercy that surprised everyone, especially Somin herself. "Why?" Somin demanded as they took her away. "Why do you not just kill me?" Hyejin looked at her cousin with something that might have been pity. "Because I learned from a human that mercy is not weakness, and because I hope that maybe in time you will learn what I learned, that building something is harder than destroying it, but so much more rewarding." Somin was taken to the exile ship. She did not go quietly, but she went, and with her departure, something lifted from the gathered warriors. A weight they had not realized they were carrying, but Hyejin did not immediately return to the imperial capital. To Admiral Jiwoo's growing frustration, she stayed on HFY 7. She told the fleet to remain in orbit and continue their normal duties. She would return when she was ready. "The Empire needs you," Jiwoo protested. "The Empire has survived 3 months without me. It can survive a few more weeks." Hyejin pulled on the work gloves Daehyun had given her. "I am not finished learning yet." So the Empress of the Draconis Empire spent her days as a farmer. She learned to milk cows, which was surprisingly difficult for someone who could turn into a dragon. She learned to fix the water pump when it broke, using nothing but basic tools and patience. She learned to cook simple meals and find satisfaction in a hard day's work. But she also did more. She invited soldiers down from the ships in small groups. She had them work on the farm, getting dirt under their claws and learning what it meant to create instead of destroy. Many of them hated it at first, but slowly, grudgingly, some began to understand. She held councils in the barn, but instead of making all the decisions herself, she asked questions. She listened. She learned that many of her soldiers had ideas they had never been allowed to voice. Ideas about better ways to govern, better ways to interact with other species, better ways to build an empire that would last. "You are teaching them democracy," Daehyun observed one evening as they sat on his porch, watching the sun set over the fields. "I am teaching them to think," Hyejin corrected. "Whether they choose democracy or something else, at least it will be a choice, not just blind obedience to tradition. Your council is not going to like this. The council that stood by while Somin poisoned me. I think it is time for a new council." She smiled, and there was fire in that expression. "And I have some ideas about how to choose them." On the 40th day, Hyejin finally prepared to return to the capital. The ships gathered in orbit and the temporary camps were dismantled. Daehyun's farm slowly returned to normal, or as normal as it could be, with massive divots in the fields where starships had landed. Admiral Jiwoo organized a ceremony before departure. She wanted to give Daehyun titles and honors to formally recognize what he had done. Daehyun politely declined all of it. "I do not need titles," he said. "I do not need honors. I just need my farm." "But you changed an empire," Jiwoo protested. "You should be recognized for that." "I did what anyone should do. I helped someone who needed help. If that changed an empire, then maybe the empire needed changing." He shrugged. "Besides, titles do not grow wheat, and I have a lot of replanting to do." Hyejin stepped forward then. "There is one title you cannot refuse, Daehyun. One I create right now for the first time in our history." She spoke in a formal voice that carried across the assembled warriors. I name you friend of the Empire. Not a servant, not a subject, a friend. The first non-draconist to hold any rank in our society. And you hold the highest rank of all because friendship is more valuable than any throne. The soldiers struck their chests in salute. The sound was like thunder. Daehyun looked embarrassed but also pleased. I will visit, Hyejin promised, when I can get away from the capital. We have much more to discuss. You are always welcome, though next time maybe use the landing pad instead of crashing through my wheat. She laughed, a sound that still surprised those who knew her. The Empress of the Draconis Empire laughing at a human's joke. It was a small thing, but it represented how much had changed. The fleet departed in waves, their engines painting the sky with fire. Daehyun stood in his field, watching them go. His farm was scarred and damaged, but it would recover. Everything recovers if you give it time and care. 6 months later, the Empire had changed in ways that would have been impossible before. Hyejin had dissolved the old council and created a new one, with representatives chosen by merit and vote, not just bloodline. She had established new policies that favored building and creating over endless conquest. She had opened diplomatic channels with species that had been enemies for centuries. Not everyone was happy. The old guard resisted. There were protests and even a few minor rebellions. But the younger generation of Draconis, the ones who had spent time on Daehyun's farm learning to work with their hands, they understood. They supported the changes because they had seen firsthand that there was more to strength than just raw power. Hyejin visited HFY 7 whenever she could escape the capital. She would land her personal ship carefully in the designated area, away from the crops. She would spend a few days working the farm alongside Daehyun, finding peace in the simple labor. They would talk about philosophy and governance while pulling weeds. They would debate the nature of strength while mending fences. Your empire is changing quickly, Daehyun observed during one visit. Some might say too quickly. Perhaps, but if we do not change, we will die. Better to risk change than to guarantee extinction. She tied off a fence post with practiced efficiency. Besides, I had a good teacher. I'm just a farmer. You are the man who saved an empire by showing it a different path. That makes you much more than just a farmer. She looked at him seriously. Your people, humans, you are going to inherit the stars, not because you are the strongest or the fastest, but because you understand what we are only now learning, that the strongest empires are not built on conquest. They are built on creation, on cooperation, on the willingness to help each other and grow together. That is a lot of pressure to put on one species, Daehyun said with a smile. You can handle it. Humans always do. A year after Somin's exile, Hyejin made a formal address to the Empire. It was broadcast to every Draconis world, every ship, every station. She stood not in her throne room but in a simple barn on HFY 7, with Daehyun standing beside her. For 300 years I ruled you as your ancestors ruled before me, through strength, through conquest, through fear, and I believed I was making us great. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I was wrong. Not about strength. We are still strong, but about what strength means, where she gestured to Daehyun. This human taught me that real strength is not about how much you can destroy. It is about how much you can build. It is not about how much fear you can inspire. It is about how much hope you can create. It is not about taking what you want. It is about making something worth having. The camera focused on the barn around her, simple and real. This building was made by one human with basic tools and determination. It has stood for 30 years through storms and disasters. He built it to last. To serve a purpose. To protect what he values. She looked directly into the camera. That is what I want for our empire. Not glory that fades. Not conquest that consumes, but something that lasts. Something worth building. Something we can be proud of, not because we took it, but because we made it. The speech became famous across the galaxy. The image of the Dragon Empress in a human barn became a symbol of the new Draconis Empire. Some called it weakness, but most called it wisdom. On HFY 7, Daehyun continued his simple life. He planted crops in the spring and harvested them in the fall. He repaired fences and machines. He lived quietly, content with his small corner of the universe. But when travelers came to his world, they always made a point to visit his farm, to see the barn where an empire had been reborn, to meet the human who had changed the course of galactic history without ever raising a weapon. And Daehyun would welcome them politely, offer them tea and then get back to work. Because crops do not care about empires or history. They care about water and sunlight and patient care. And in that simple truth was all the wisdom the galaxy would ever need.